So I'm reading a whole bunch about Mythos, the new release from Anthropic, and its implications for cybersecurity. And I mean, this is big and interesting and not incredibly surprising. I also think it's quite good for some of the projects we have going in the Singularity Net and the ASI ecosystem, right? I mean, it makes what we're building with omegaclaw and with the ASI chain, for example, way more relevant, not less so, right? So, I mean, to set the context, so Anthropic says the new Mythos model, it's found thousands of high severity zero-day vulnerabilities across all this critical software, right? Operating systems, browsers, commercial software products, you name it, right? And it's all kinds of different bugs, like logic bugs, authorization bypasses, kernel issues, the works, right? And this is pretty well validated by now, right? Like, for example, Mozilla already confirmed an early version of Claude found 22 actual Firefox vulnerabilities in 2 weeks. 14 of them were high severity, right? So, I mean, this is real stuff. We can't believe every single dramatic claim. Some things could be overstated, but pretty much it seems real. And it's not super surprising because, I mean, these vulnerabilities have been sitting there a long time, but not because the human brain is too dumb to find them, right? It's because finding them would cost a lot of money. You would need highly trained people with a lot of patience and special tools just to spend time, running one script after another, trying to find the vulnerability, right? And so now, that defense in the form of the scarcity of elite security researchers, that defense isn't there anymore, right? The Mythos class models, and Mythos is the one now, there's going to be more and more from US and from China, right? What these Mythos class models do, they lower the cost of finding these vulnerabilities a lot. So you don't need an elite security researcher anymore, right? These models will stay on task, they'll read the huge code base, they'll track subtle interactions, and they'll just keep going and going, trying one exploit idea after another without getting tired, right? So this used to take an expert human days or weeks. Now the model will just crunch through it way faster. So the defense of it being expensive and annoying to find elite security guys to find bugs, like that defense is gone, right? And this is where it gets interesting for the omegaclaw tool that we're working on at Singularity. I mean, omegaclaw being the new name for what we were calling hyperclaw, and metaclaw, which is a claw-type system coded largely in our meta-AGI programming language and using pieces of our Hyperon AGI framework for working memory, long-term memory, reasoning, and so forth, right? So omegaclaw, we always saw it could be applied to cybersecurity, among other things, but it was never like a bug hunting system mainly. It's a reasoning system, right? Like omegaclaw takes in evidence, which could be messy, uncertain, or contradictory from many different sources, and omegaclaw figures out what's going on. So we're experimenting with connecting omegaclaw to PLN, probabilistic logic network reasoning, to keep track of competing hypotheses about what's going on in a given situation, find evidence against some, find evidence for some, give confidence scores to different hypotheses, and it's all transparent. So every conclusion traces back to specific evidence through explicit inference chains. And, this is going to be more and more important, this kind of reasoning in a post-Mythos world. Like if frontier Mythos class models can generate a huge flood of candidate vulnerability reports, I mean, the trick is them having humans filter through all this LLM-generated information, right? Like, until the LLMs are really human-level AGI, you're still needing a human to look at all the candidate findings and be sure which ones are actually important, like which ones have a vulnerable code path that's actually reachable in real deployments, like which ones are most critical in terms of how the software is actually used, right? And omegaclaw can be very helpful with this triage stage of kind of driving the Mythos class models in this security work and doing reasoning based on the uncertain real world situation regarding which of their findings are actually important, right? So let's say, for example, like a Mythos class model says, oh, I found an auth bypass in this function in this code base. omegaclaw then takes that finding from Mythos, whatever other model, as a hypothesis with uncertainty. It asks questions, right? It runs a proof of concept in a sandbox. It does various taint analyses. It checks whether the vulnerable path is reachable from a public API. It checks whether there's a capability model available that blocks that exploit. It can do the patch and run regression tests, and it can be doing PLN reasoning, incorporating an understanding of the whole context here, right? So the thing is, you need the claw here, this agentic system that goes out and gathers evidence and reasons on it. You need it to be invoking formal verifiers as well as looking at log databases, right? You need it to be invoking static analyzers, fuzzers, reproduction harnesses, provenance checkers, deployment scanners, blah, 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 and a whole bunch of cybersecurity stuff that I've dealt with, but I'm not the expert on. But, omegaclaw can be the expert on because all of this stuff is out there on the internet, right? You need omegaclaw to leverage its flexibility of action and knowledge representation and reasoning to become, in essence, like a verifier orchestration layer for this whole new era of AI vulnerability discovery, right? And that's all important, but there's an even deeper layer to it, right? And this has to do with ASI chain, right? Because ASI chain, the new AI layer 1 blockchain that we're building on the Firefly/Metaclaw infrastructure from Greg Meredith and his team. Our main goal with the ASI chain was to make a blockchain where you could run complex AI and even AGI processes on chain, and the more of the functions you put on chain, the more expensive it gets. But it's not going to be insanely expensive to run AI on chain, quite unlike existing blockchains, right? On the other hand, the way we're doing this involves a high level of formal verifiability in the infrastructure, right? So the aspiration here is provably secure by design for the whole stack, right? Now, we're not there initially, but at least it will be a highly formal verifiability, provable security oriented architecture compared to anything that's out there now, right? So this is more and more and more important when you have Mythos class models out there finding vulnerabilities and orchestrating hacks, right? The cheaper bug discovery gets, the more important it is to have like a capability-based, proof-oriented architecture, right? So, we need to be explicit here about exactly how far we can get toward provably secure by design, how fast, right? Because, the bar gets higher and higher as you have better and better AI hackers, right? So what we have now, like we have a very solid, trusted computing base from Firefly and Metacycle, and within this we have some subsystems that are fully formally verifiable, like our meta language kernel, the interpreter generated there, the consensus layer, like these are all fully formally verifiable. Then you've got other stuff at the edges, like a wallet UI, someone's complex AI code, connections to social media, agent permissioning. You have things that are not fully formally verifiable in the sense that this kernel stuff is. So these are attack services, and this is where the interaction with omegaclaw gets interesting, right? Because you have this core stuff that's fully, we can prove it's secure using math and using our AI verifiers. then you have this edge stuff that's also part of the ecosystem, and you have omegaclaw constantly running to look at vulnerabilities that AI systems may have found there and figure out which ones are real, which ones need to be dealt with, and how, right? So, I mean, you get deep into the weeds here more than it makes sense to do in this sort of video, but the bottom line is, like, Mythos and the other models of that class that are coming soon, these don't mean like software is totally fucked. They don't mean software security is over. It means the era of security through the scarcity of security professionals is over, right? Like, AI security professional agents will be abundant. So the value lies in building systems that can absorb the AI scale discovery and turn it into defensible real world judgments using context aware reasoning, right? And then enforce tighter control over what happens next. So omegaclaw for reasoning and validation, ASI chain for enforcement and coordination, and then frontier models like Mythos for discovery, right? So this is it's amazing how quickly things are getting overturned, like week by week, day by day. On the other hand, if you have a solid architecture based on math and modular layered software design and powered by, proto AGI tools that can adapt to a variety of different situations, like, then you can pivot and take these wacky new developments, as forcing functions to refine your architecture and drive it to get even better and better. So I'm actually quite psyched by the new opportunities Mythos opens up for omegaclaw, ASI chain, and the other tools in our ecosystem.